I'll pump you until your legs shake. Giant bride, promised the lonely cowboy. The dust hung thick in the air like a shroud over the Colorado frontier, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. It was 1787, and the land stretched endlessly, cruel, beautiful, and unforgiving. Out here, the law was whatever a man could enforce with his own two hands, and loneliness was as common as the tumbleweeds that rolled across the plains. Silas Kane stood by the split-rail fence, hammer in hand, squinting against the setting sun. At 32, he looked older, lines carved deep around his eyes from too many days under the merciless sky, his lean frame hardened by years of solitary survival. His parents and younger sister had succumbed to fever 5 winters ago, leaving him with nothing but their small ranch, a handful of cattle, and an ache in his chest that never quite went away. He drove another nail into the weathered wood, the sound echoing across the empty prairie. The fence needed mending before winter, before the storms came howling down from the mountains. Everything always needed mending out here: fences, roofs, hearts. The thunder of hooves made him turn. Through the curtain of dust came a rider, moving fast, too fast. Silas dropped his hammer and reached for the rifle leaning against the fence post, his body tensing with practiced caution. Raiders had been active lately, preying on isolated homesteads like his own. But as the rider drew closer, he froze. It was a woman, though woman seemed too small a word. She sat astride a massive bay horse, her frame towering even in the saddle. She had to be nearly 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms that showed defined muscle beneath her rolled-up sleeves. Her dark hair whipped behind her in a long braid, and her face, angular and striking, was set with determination. She reined up hard, her horse's hooves kicking up a cloud of dirt. "Raiders!" she gasped, her voice deep and urgent. "3 miles back! They're coming this way!" Before Silas could respond, gunshots cracked across the plains. 6 riders appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the dying light like demons from hell itself. "Get inside!" Silas shouted, but the woman had already dismounted with surprising grace. She pulled a rifle from her saddle, a weapon that would have looked oversized in most hands, but seemed natural in hers. "I don't run," she said simply. There was no time to argue. The raiders were closing fast, whooping and firing. Silas took position behind a water trough, while the woman, this giant, fearless woman, stood her ground beside the fence. The first raider came within range, and her rifle spoke. The man tumbled from his saddle. Silas's shot took down another. The remaining 4 split up, trying to flank them from both sides. "Left side!" the woman called out, swinging her rifle with deadly precision. She didn't just shoot. She moved like someone who'd grown up fighting, anticipating angles, using the terrain. A raider burst through the fence line, knife drawn, going straight for Silas. Before he could react, the woman was there. She swung her rifle like a club, connecting with the raider's jaw with a sickening crunch. The man dropped like a stone. The other 3, seeing their companions fall, reconsidered their odds. With curses and threats, they wheeled their horses around and fled into the gathering darkness. Silence fell over the ranch, broken only by their heavy breathing and the nervous stamping of horses. Silas turned to look at the woman properly for the first time. She was checking her rifle methodically, as if ambushes were routine. In the fading light, he could see her more clearly. She wasn't just tall and strong. She was striking in a way that defied convention. There was power in every line of her body, but also a certain grace, like a mountain cat. "I'm Abigail McAllister," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "Most folks call me Abby. Some call me other things." Silas Kane. He noticed the wariness in her gaze, the way she held herself as if expecting rejection or mockery. "Thank you. You saved my life." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or relief. "You held your own well enough." "Where are you headed?" he asked, suddenly not wanting her to leave. She shrugged those broad shoulders. "Nowhere in particular. Everywhere in general. I was heading toward the settlement by the river, looking for work." "Stay the night," he heard himself say. "It's not safe to travel after dark, and there might be more of them." She studied him for a long moment, and he realized she was deciding whether he was trustworthy. Finally, she nodded. "I'd appreciate that." That night, over a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Silas learned her story. Abby had grown up on a hard-scrabble farm in Missouri. Her unusual size had manifested early. By 12, she'd been taller than her father. By 15, stronger than most men in their county. "Folks didn't know what to make of me," she said, staring into the fire. "My mama said I was a gift from God. My daddy said I was born to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." Her voice dropped. "But when the raiders came to our farm, I was in town. I came back to find them both dead. I was 17. "I'm sorry," Silas said quietly. "I learned to fight after that. Learned to shoot, to ride, to survive. Hired myself out as a guard for wagon trains, as a ranch hand, anything that needed muscle and courage." She laughed, but it was bitter. "Men don't like it, though. They want a woman to be small and delicate. They look at me like I'm some kind of freak." "I don't," Silas said, and meant it. She looked at him sharply, searching his face for mockery or pity. Finding neither, she softened slightly. "Maybe you're different." "Maybe we both are," he replied. "Different enough to understand being alone." Something passed between them then, a recognition of kindred spirits in a harsh world. Abby stayed for a week, then 2. She helped mend the fence, worked with the cattle, proved herself invaluable in a dozen ways. Silas found himself watching her, the way she moved with such confidence, the rare smiles that transformed her angular face, the gentleness in her hands when she tended to an injured calf. He was falling in love, and it terrified him, because everything Silas loved seemed to die. His family, the dog he'd had as a boy, even the land itself felt hostile, ready to snatch away anything precious. How could he ask this remarkable woman to tie herself to a lonely cowboy on a failing ranch, knowing that danger lurked around every corner? Abby, for her part, was fighting her own battle. She caught Silas looking at her with something that might have been admiration, might have been affection. But she'd been fooled before. Men who seemed interested in her strength always ended up intimidated by it. They wanted her to be smaller, weaker, more conventional. And she could never be that. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Abby finally spoke what was on her mind. "I should move on soon," she said. "Find that work I was looking for." Silas's heart clenched. "Do you want to?" "No," she admitted, "but I don't want to wear out my welcome either." "You couldn't," he said quickly, then hesitated. "Abby, there's something I need to tell you." She turned to face him, and in the moonlight her eyes were luminous. "I'm not good at this," Silas continued, his voice rough. "Talking about feelings, but you should know that these past few weeks have been the best I've had in years. You make this place feel less empty. You make me feel less empty." Abby's breath caught. "Silas, but I can't ask you to stay," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "This life is hard, dangerous. I've lost everyone I've ever loved, and I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." For a moment, Abby just stared at him. Then she stood, her considerable height making him crane his neck to meet her eyes. "That's not your choice to make," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've been fighting my whole life, Silas. Fighting to survive, fighting to prove I'm more than just my size, fighting to find a place where I belong. And for the first time, I've found somewhere that feels like home. Someone who looks at me and sees a person, not a curiosity or a problem." She knelt down so they were eye to eye. "I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting. I'm strong. We could be strong together." "What if I fail you?" Silas whispered. "What if you don't?" she countered. "What if we're exactly what each other needs?" He reached up and touched her face, his calloused hand gentle against her cheek. "I'm terrified of losing you." "Then don't push me away," she said. "That's the only way you'll lose me." They kissed, then tentative at first, then with growing passion, two lonely souls finding solace in each other under the vast western sky. The next few weeks were the happiest either of them had known. They worked the ranch together, fell into an easy rhythm of shared labor and shared evenings. Silas taught Abby the intricacies of cattle breeding. Abby taught Silas defensive techniques she'd learned in her travels. But the frontier had a way of disrupting happiness. It was early October when the trouble started. A gang, led by a man named Cutter Hayes, had been terrorizing the region, growing bolder with each raid. They'd hit 3 homesteads in the past month, killing anyone who resisted and burning what they couldn't steal. News reached them through a traveling preacher who stopped for water. "They're moving north," he warned, "toward the settlement, toward isolated ranches like yours." That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He stood outside, watching the darkness, rifle in hand. Abby found him there. "You're thinking about sending me away," she said. It wasn't a question. "For your safety?" "No." Her voice was firm. "We've been through this. I stay. We face whatever comes together." "Abby, Hayes has 20 men, maybe more. If they come here—" "Then we fight," she interrupted, "or we leave together. But I won't be separated from you. Not now." Silas turned to face her, his eyes haunted. "I watched my family die, unable to stop it. The fever took them one by one, and I was helpless. If Hayes's gang comes and I can't protect you—" "Then I'll protect you," Abby said simply. "That's what partners do." The word partners hung between them, full of meaning. "Marry me," Silas said suddenly. "If we're going to face this world together, let's do it properly. Let me call you my wife. Let me be your husband." Abby's eyes widened. "Are you proposing because you love me, or because you're afraid?" "Both," he admitted. "I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. And yes, I'm afraid of losing you, afraid of not being enough. But mostly, I'm afraid of not having you in my life." She pulled him close, her arms strong around him. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you. But Silas, you have to promise me something." "Anything. Promise me you'll stop seeing yourself as weak or insufficient. You're one of the strongest men I've ever met, not because of your muscles, but because of your heart, your kindness, your integrity." He nodded against her shoulder, feeling tears prick his eyes. They were married 2 days later by the same traveling preacher, in a simple ceremony with no guests except the wind and the wide sky. Abby wore her best dress, sturdy cotton that she'd owned for years. Silas wore his cleanest shirt. They spoke their vows with hands clasped, meaning every word. That night, in the small cabin, they consummated their marriage with a tenderness that surprised them both. Silas had worried about his inexperience, about disappointing her, but Abby guided him with patience and passion, and they discovered each other with wonder and joy. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Abby traced patterns on his chest. "I used to think," she said softly, "that no man would ever want me, that I was too different, too much." "You're not too much," Silas replied. "You're exactly right." She smiled and kissed him. "And I promise you, Silas Kane, I will make sure you never feel alone again. I'll be with you through every trial, every danger, every joy. I'll love you so completely that your legs will shake, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of being loved." He laughed, pulling her closer. "That's quite a promise." "I always keep my promises," she said. The test came sooner than they expected. 3 days after their wedding, smoke appeared on the southern horizon. Too much smoke to be a cooking fire. By the time they rode toward it, the Henderson homestead, their nearest neighbors, was ash and embers. The family had fled, but their livelihood was destroyed. "Haze," Silas said grimly. "They found the Hendersons at the settlement, a ramshackle collection of buildings that barely qualified as a town. Other families had gathered there, too, refugees from Hayes's terror. He's demanding protection money," Old Man Henderson explained, his face smudged with soot. "Said if the settlement doesn't pay him $500 by the end of the week, he'll burn us all out." $500? Someone scoffed. "We don't have 50 between us." "Then we fight," Abby said. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood head and shoulders above most of the men, her presence commanding. "Fight?" Henderson said. "With what? Most of us are farmers, shopkeepers. Hayes has an army." "Hayes has a gang of bullies who've never faced real resistance," Abby countered. "You have this settlement, which can be fortified. You have people who are tired of running, and you have me." "And me," Silas added, standing beside his wife. A young woman named Sarah, whose husband had been killed in a raid, stepped forward. "I can shoot. I want to fight." One by one, others joined. Not everyone. Some families chose to flee further north, but enough stayed to form a defense. Over the next 3 days, they prepared. Abby drew on her experience guarding wagon trains to organize the settlement's defenses. They reinforced buildings, created firing positions, stockpiled ammunition and water. Silas used his knowledge of the terrain to set up early warning systems, strategically placed mirrors that could signal Hayes's approach. The children and those who couldn't fight were hidden in the church cellar, the sturdiest building in town. "You're a natural leader," Silas told Abby one night as they reviewed their preparations. She shook her head. "I'm just someone who's tired of running, tired of being afraid." "Still," he said, pulling her close, "I'm in awe of you." She kissed him deeply. "Save your awe. We haven't won yet." The 4th day dawned clear and hot. The mirrors flashed at noon. Hayes was coming, right on schedule. 23 riders appeared on the horizon, moving in a loose formation. At their head rode Cutter Hayes himself, a scarred man with dead eyes and a reputation for cruelty. They stopped at the edge of town. Hayes dismounted, his hand resting casually on his pistol. "I've come for my money," he called out. Abby stepped forward, her rifle held loosely but ready. Silas moved to stand beside her, mirroring her stance. "We don't have your money," Abby replied, her voice carrying across the distance. "And we don't want your protection. Leave now, and no one has to die today." Hayes laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're that giant woman I've heard about, the one who thinks she's a man." His eyes swept over her with contempt. "Tell you what, you come with me as entertainment for my boys, and I'll leave the town alone." Silas felt rage surge through him, but Abby's hand on his arm was steady. "I said leave," she repeated. "This is your only warning." "Boys!" Hayes called. "Burn it down!" The gang spurred their horses forward, whooping and firing, but they rode straight into the trap Abby had prepared. Ropes strung low across the main street caught the first horses, sending riders sprawling. From the windows and rooftops, the townspeople opened fire. It wasn't pretty or glorious. It was chaos, smoke and noise and terror. But the defenders held their positions, following Abby's shouted instructions. Silas fought beside his wife, marveling at her courage and tactical skill. She was everywhere at once, directing fire, pulling wounded defenders to safety, reloading with mechanical efficiency. Hayes's gang, used to easy pickings, found themselves in a real fight. 3 went down in the initial volley. 5 more were wounded. The rest took cover, returning fire. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. Hayes, realizing he was losing, tried to rally his men for a coordinated assault on the church. That's when things went wrong. Sarah, the young widow, was caught in the open, reloading. One of Hayes's men drew a bead on her. Abby saw it, shouted a warning, started running, but she was too far away. Silas wasn't. He threw himself forward, tackling Sarah out of the line of fire. The bullet meant for her tore through his shoulder instead, spinning him around. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding through his body. "Silas!" Abby's scream cut through the gunfire. She ran to him, heedless of the bullets kicking up dust around her feet. She pulled him behind cover, her hands shaking as she examined his wound. "You idiot," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You beautiful, brave idiot." "Couldn't let her die," he gasped. "Sarah, pressure here," Abby commanded, placing the woman's hands on the wound. Then she stood, and something changed in her face. All the warmth drained away, replaced by cold fury. She stepped out into the street, fully exposed, and began walking toward Hayes. "Abby, no!" Silas tried to call out, but his voice was weak. Hayes fired at her. She didn't even flinch as the bullet passed close enough to tear her sleeve. She kept walking. She raised her rifle and fired once, twice, 3 times. Each shot found its mark. 3 more of Hayes's men fell. The gang broke. Faced with this implacable, terrifying woman who walked through gunfire like an avenging angel, the remaining raiders fled. Hayes himself hesitated, pride warring with self-preservation. Abby closed the distance between them. Hayes drew his pistol, but she was faster. She knocked it from his hand with the barrel of her rifle, then drove the stock into his stomach. As he doubled over, she brought her knee up, connecting with his face. Hayes crumpled, unconscious. The town defenders emerged from cover, cautiously at first, then with growing jubilation. They'd won. They'd actually won. But Abby wasn't celebrating. She ran back to Silas, dropping to her knees beside him. "Don't you dare die on me," she said fiercely. Not now, not after everything. Not planning to, he managed, though the pain was making him dizzy. Just need a minute. The settlement had a doctor of sorts, a man who'd studied medicine back east before drink had driven him west. With Abby hovering over him like a protective bear, he extracted the bullet from Silas's shoulder and stitched the wound closed. He'll live, the doctor pronounced. Needs rest and no infection. Keep the wound clean. Abby practically carried Silas back to their ranch that evening, refusing to let him walk despite his protests. She settled him into bed with such tender ferocity that he couldn't help but smile. "I'm okay," he assured her. "Thanks to you." "Thanks to us," she corrected. "You saved Sarah. When I saw you go down, Silas, I thought my heart would stop. I understood then why you've been so afraid. Loving someone means being vulnerable to that kind of pain." He reached up with his good arm and touched her face. "But it's worth it. You're worth it." She kissed him softly. "Get some sleep. We'll talk more when you're healed." But Silas caught her hand. "Wait. There's something I need to say." "What?" "I spent so long being afraid of living, afraid of losing, that I almost missed out on actually living. You taught me that strength isn't about never being scared. It's about being scared and choosing to love anyway, to fight anyway, to build a life anyway." Abby's eyes filled with tears. "Silas, I love you," he continued, "not despite your strength, but because of it. Because you're brave and fierce and tender all at once. Because you make me want to be better, to do more, to live fully instead of just surviving." "I love you too," she whispered, "so much that it terrifies me. I never thought I'd find someone who saw me, really saw me, and didn't turn away." "Never," he promised. "I'll never turn away." Silas's recovery took 3 weeks. During that time, Abby ran the ranch with capable efficiency, tending to both the cattle and her husband with equal devotion. The settlement folk came to help, grateful for the couple's bravery. Sarah brought meals. Henderson helped with the heavy work. A new community was forming, bound together by shared survival. Hayes and his surviving gang members were turned over to the territorial marshal when he finally arrived. The $500 bounty on Hayes's head was split among the defenders, giving everyone a much-needed financial boost. One evening, as Silas was finally strong enough to sit up properly, Abby came to sit beside him on the bed. She had an unusual expression on her face, part nervousness, part mischief. "What?" he asked. "I've been thinking," she said. "Dangerous activity," he teased. She swatted his good shoulder gently. "Hush. I've been thinking about what you said, about being afraid to live fully, and I realized I've been holding back too." "What do you mean?" Abby took a deep breath. "All my life, I've tried to make myself smaller. Not physically, I obviously can't do that, but in other ways. I've hidden parts of myself, tried not to be too loud, too assertive, too much, because I thought that's what men wanted." "Abby, let me finish," she said. "But you never asked me to be less. You celebrate who I am, and I want you to know that I'm done hiding. I'm going to be fully myself, loud, strong, passionate, all of it, and I promise you something." She leaned in close, her eyes intense. "I promise that I will love you with that same fullness, with every ounce of strength I have. I will stand by you, fight for you, build a life with you that's so rich and real that you'll never doubt you're loved. I'll support you, challenge you, and yes, sometimes probably exhaust you. Silas laughed, which hurt his shoulder, but was worth it. I'll love you so thoroughly, Abby continued, her voice dropping to something intimate, that your legs will shake, not from fear, but from the sheer overwhelming joy of being completely, utterly cherished. That's quite a promise, Silas said, echoing their wedding night conversation. I always keep my promises, she replied, also echoing. He pulled her down for a kiss, deep and full of promise. Then I promise the same to you. I will love all of you, your strength, your passion, your complexity. I will never ask you to be less than you are, and I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you. You already are, she whispered against his lips. Winter came early that year, blanketing the prairie in snow. Silas and Abby spent the long evenings by the fire making plans. They would expand the ranch, maybe start breeding horses as well as cattle. They'd help rebuild the Henderson place come spring. Maybe, Abby said shyly, they'd even think about starting a family. Can you imagine, Silas said, grinning, a child with your strength and courage? And your heart and wisdom, she added. They'd be unstoppable. But that was for the future. For now, they had each other, a warm cabin, and the promise of spring. One particularly cold night, as they lay together in bed, Silas traced the line of Abby's arm, marveling at the strength evident even in rest. What are you thinking? She asked. That I'm the luckiest man alive, he said simply. A year ago, I was alone, just surviving day to day. Now I have you, a partner, a love, a future. Abby turned to face him, her expression soft in the firelight. I was so lost before you. I had convinced myself that strength meant not needing anyone. But you showed me that real strength is allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to need someone, to build something together. We're quite a pair, Silas said. The lonely cowboy and the giant bride, she agreed, smiling. Not so lonely anymore, he pointed out. Not so lonely at all, she confirmed. They made love that night with a tenderness born of deep knowledge of each other. Every touch was a conversation, every kiss a promise kept. And afterward, as they lay tangled together, Silas's legs were indeed shaking, from passion, from joy, from the overwhelming sense of being exactly where he belonged. Told you, Abby murmured, sounding smug. You did, he agreed, laughing. You promised my legs would shake. From being loved, she said, not from fear. Best promise anyone's ever made me, Silas said, pulling her closer. Spring came with a burst of wildflowers across the prairie. Silas and Abby rode out one morning to check the cattle, their horses moving side by side through the tall grass. The land stretched endlessly in every direction, still harsh, still unforgiving, but somehow less daunting when faced together. They stopped on a rise overlooking their property. Silas's shoulder had healed well, though it ached in cold weather. The ranch was thriving. The settlement had grown, with new families arriving, drawn by news of a community that stood together against threats. Beautiful, Abby said, surveying the view. Yes, Silas agreed, but he was looking at her. She caught his gaze and smiled. Still sappy, cowboy? Always, he replied without shame. They dismounted, letting the horses graze. Silas pulled Abby close, feeling her warmth against him, her strength surrounding him. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For being brave enough to stay, for seeing something worth loving in a lonely cowboy, for promising to shake my legs. He grinned at the last part. She laughed, the sound carrying across the prairie. I promised to keep shaking them If you keep looking at me like I'm the most precious thing in the world, that's easy, Silas said, because you are. They stood there for a long moment, two figures against the vast sky, the giant bride and the lonely cowboy who wasn't lonely anymore. They had faced raiders and bullets, isolation and fear. They had found each other in a hard land and built something soft and strong between them. "Ready to head back?" Abby asked finally. "Ready," Silas said, taking her hand. They mounted their horses and rode toward home, toward the cabin they'd built together, the life they'd carved from the wilderness, the future they'd fight to protect. Behind them, the prairie stretched empty. Ahead, smoke rose from their chimney, promising warmth and dinner and another evening together. The frontier was still dangerous. The work was still hard. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Abby turned to Silas with a smile that held all the love and promise in the world. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," he replied, "my giant bride." "Your giant bride," she agreed, "forever." And under the vast western sky, with their hands clasped tight and their hearts full, they rode home together.